Welcome to the Creative Forum. We're here to support women and girls on the UN's Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. For those of you who joined our first panel, talking about domestic violence with survivors and advocates, it was an amazing discussion. And we're honored as well to have heard testimony from Helen, a survivor. Joining us now is a panel filled with just amazing and iconic women and one cat. We are really honored to have comparing today's panel, Baria Alamuddin. We actually just realized we need to correct the spelling of your name. We'll do that right now. She is a world-renowned Lebanese journalist and advocate with experience interviewing heads of state and amazing people around the world. And she's here today with a panel of 3 women who are just incredibly inspiring and iconic.
Joan Collins, I must start with you. I have great respect for you, for your career, for what you have accomplished as a writer, as an actress, as a role model to many people. Who is your role model?
Well, I've been thinking about that question, Baria, and I think that in retrospect, not at the time, but in retrospect, my role model was actually my mother. My mother had a very, very difficult time during the Second World War. She had me, a toddler, my sister, a newborn, and she had to cope with us going on not 1, not 2, not 3, but about 6 or 7 different evacuations. We kept on being summoned back to London because my father was staying there and he was doing a lot for the troops. He was putting on shows, so he was staying in London to keep everybody smiling and happy. My mother had to cope with the traveling, with the having to deal with a young little girl, me, having to go to different schools all the time, which was very, very painful, making new friends and being, I think this happens to a lot of little girls, being verbally abused in a childlike way. Children can be very cruel, as you know. So my mother was, she was a great mother. She was so caring. She was the most cuddliest person. But of course, I didn't really appreciate that at the time. It was only in retrospect later that I did, because I don't think you really appreciate your mothers when you're very young. And then as I grew older and much older, my role model actually became Margaret Thatcher, our Prime Minister. I see her as being a woman against many men. She was finally kicked out of office by men. That's a whole different story. But the way that she coped, the way that she stood up for herself, she stood up for the way that she thought about things. Many, many people did not agree with her, and she did not care. She barreled through, and I admire her very much for that.
That's wonderful. But do you see any parallels when you mention how Margaret Thatcher had to cope with all this masculinity around her and all these very strong men? Indeed, I knew most of them because I used to interview them. And I had numerous occasions where I was able to interview her and talk to her. But do you see any parallels with your life? Were you also, when you started your career, do you see any parallels there?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I started my career as a very young actress when I was 17 in the 50s, when to be a young, pretty girl was very tough because men almost treated you like toys. And if you were pretty, you were even more of a toy and more something that they would like to use, abuse, and throw away. I was told when I was 21 that I better make every opportunity count in my career, because by the time I was 23, I would be washed up and finished. And that was a very prevalent attitude. It was very ageist. And at a very young age, I realized that ageism was something that women were going to have to cope with. And there was too much.
Well, you do it very well, definitely. You're great.
Thank you, yeah. But, you know, it's very prevalent now to knock women who are pretty or good looking, and it's very wrong. Anyway, I felt that I was referred to constantly as, when I worked in films, I started at 17, as the girl. And I remember saying, my name's Joan. Why do you have to call me the girl? And they would say, you are the girl. That's what you are. You're the girl, in rather dismissive terms. So there was a lot to learn. And it took me a long time to be able to get out of that shell, as it were. I became very strong during that time. I would not allow myself to be used and abused by men. I would not allow myself to go to the casting couch, which was something that was very, very prevalent, both in English movie business and in Hollywood. And I think that I succeeded in creating a carapace of strength around myself without losing my vulnerability, I hope.
Wonderful. I want to go to you ladies, Claire, and but did you face the same problems when you started working at the beginning, and did you go straight to the career you have now?
Well, Alice actually has had a much more varied career than me, haven't you?
Well, in a way, I mean, I studied politics at university and then went into acting, and then went into news at BBC, but I was an actress first. And it's interesting what Joan says about being the girl, even in my day when I was much younger and acting. But I have to say, I think there's a slightly different dynamic in that I'm gay, and I knew that I was gay from the time I left university. And in a sense, that takes an element out of the game. It doesn't mean you're any less a woman, but it means there's an element of, say, the casting couch or whatever, that is just, as long as everybody knows you're gay, that's out of bounds. That's.
Did you have to say it? Did you have to tell them? Did you have to use it?
I think it was pretty general knowledge, so I never hid it. So I was very out from a young age, and I just think it changes the dynamic. I'm not sure it makes it easier or more difficult. I'm not sure what I'm saying about it. I just think it's a slightly different dynamic when there isn't a sexual tension of any kind between men and you.
What about you, Claire?
I think that when I started in sports broadcasting, there were very, very few women doing what I wanted to do. So in terms of finding, examples of who you wanted to be like, there were very few women. I mean, Sue Barker had just started. She'd finished playing tennis, and she'd started at Sky, I think, in the mid 80s. But Sky, when did Sky start? But anyway, and then came to the BBC. So Sue and Helen Rollason, who was the first woman to present Grandstand, were the ones that I looked at and went, oh, well, there's two of them, maybe I can do that. But now, luckily now, there are loads and loads and loads in lots of different ways, doing lots of different jobs around sport, which is great. But it was not considered, certainly by my father, not considered an option for women, and couldn't believe that this was what I was even going to try and do, because clearly I was going to fail because women didn't do that. So in a way, you drive yourself on from those who don't think it's possible, rather than seeing examples of many who have done it. I think in broadcasting style, and Joan will have been interviewed by the late great Terry Wogan, I loved his warmth, his casual charm. I think Graham Norton has it too, and I think there's a sometimes it's really hard to quantify, it's very hard to teach, but I think charm on air, radio or television, is the most important thing. Ant and Dec have it, don't they? And
Yeah.
and it's a really important element of what we do, because what you know, in broadcasting, you're not becoming someone else, you are yourself, but hopefully a slightly neater and tidier and better version of yourself.
Then John, I mean, the charm is not something you need at all. You have so much of it. So how did what you learned from your mom help you cope at the beginning of your career? Because I think we all agree that things have moved forward since we all started our career, and I hope in the right direction. I'm not saying all is okay, but I'm saying things have moved in the right direction. So what have you learned from your mom?
Well, I learned from my mother, in actual fact, what not to do. My mother, and I only started to admire her later when I realized what she'd done for me. I found her very subservient to my father, which I did not like. And she made us all, Jackie, me, even my little brother Bill, be almost cow down to him. He was a very strong and rather scary guy. He wasn't particularly tall. He was very handsome, actually. He was very popular and he had a lot of charm, but he was terrifying. And if we were ever naughty, which of course we were because we were children, my mother would say, you know, your father will come home and he's going to hit you. Well, he never did. But the threat of that always hung over me. And I always thought from that, I will never, ever allow a man to hit me or to abuse me physically in any way. Because you would literally, when my father, if we had, for example, I remember Jackie and me being in the bath once and we were throwing soap at each other, and she was very young, she was like 3 and I was like 6 or 7. And our mother came in and was going crazy with us. We were really being impossible. She tried to pretend to drown us and we were screaming and yelling, and she said, you know, your father will, you know, your father is really going to beat you up when he comes in. Very bad thing for her to say. Women would not say that today. Anyway, when he came in, I literally froze. I thought, he's going to hit me. He's going to hit me. He never did, but the threat was always there. And I think that's something that a lot of men use to women even today. And I think it's a terrible thing, because the one thing that they have that we don't have is they have more physical strength. Well, actually, Claire, you're very strong, but you know, I'm not that physically strong. I mean, I try to be, but I'm not. You know, I'm not that tall. I'm not that, you know, muscular. But I do think that there is a tremendous rise in abuse today, particularly since this COVID, of women living with their abusive partners. It's abuse, and I think men use their physical power to abuse women far, far, far too much.
It's up 30% actually in certain areas of the world. I think but in others it's a bit more. And apparently 243 million women around the world face that even before COVID. And I think we do little in this domain. But ladies, let me go back to you and the culture you have. What do you think, especially now in your careers, what are the big struggles and that face women? I mean, I know that, for example, in the BBC, equal pay is much more now that thing. It's becoming, no, not yet. You don't agree? Okay, so let's talk about that. But also there are other challenges. I personally believe the best thing to free a woman is her economic independence and her education. So indeed, what her income is extremely important. So if you ladies could take it one, whoever would like to start first, maybe Claire?
I think the jewel, I think the sort of the thing you're after, the two things that really matter, respect and reward. And if both are offered equally, then you're living in a fair society. Sadly, I still think that is not the case. And if I take an extreme example of the worst of tribal behavior, it comes in men's football. And any woman who pops up on a football program offering her expertise or in the role of presenting it, will be opening the door to such vile abuse on social media. Baria, you cannot believe that people, the way they come out with poison, and they'll quite often hide behind an anonymous, you know, frog or something, but as an icon. It's really shocking, and I try not, I mean, I do women's football, I try not to go near men's football because it's such a toxic environment still. But I really feel for those that do, and people who will have played in World Cups, won World Cups, you know, played for the most successful women's clubs in the country, coached at every level, will constantly be having to prove that they know something about, you know, okay, football's technically, I guess, quite a difficult sport, but it's not nuclear science. Come on, you know, it's not. They've played it, they have done it, they have studied it, they have done their homework. And
Alice, how do we tackle this then?
How do we tackle it? I think in every industry, and therefore in every subsection of every industry, so just using football as the example, because it's quite an extreme one, I think every club has to take responsibility, not just for what is said within stadiums, and be much stronger on racism and homophobia in particular, but because those tend to be the things that are chanted out loud or said out loud, that is just, you know, not just unacceptable, illegal. I think the clubs need to be much stronger in expelling people and taking away season tickets, but right now obviously crowds are not allowed, so people have gone online to share their extreme opinions, and I think both Twitter and Facebook and any other social media forum, not only expelling them from that social media forum, but also the clubs taking responsibility. If they say in their biog, I am an Everton fan, in the same way if somebody says what job they do, they would be open to being sacked from that job for saying things that are not acceptable in the workplace. I think just a bit more responsibility. I think it comes from society rather than expecting individuals constantly to be fighting battles. It's why when the law changed on equal marriage, so much changed.
I mean, I believe that, you know, we are the ladies are the ones that bring up the girl and the boy. If indeed we try to bring them up in the same way and give them the same freedoms and the same responsibility and teach them that they're actually equal, and maybe they're stronger physically, but in other ways. Alice, what do you think? How can we solve this? It's still going on.
Well, we're talking about, you mentioned about equal reward, and equal pay has obviously been a huge thing. We were talking about, you know, the power of having economic freedom. And there's such a historic issue with that when women went into the workplace, I mean, for example, when I started at the BBC in the news area, I only found out just before I left that someone of equal standing to me, equal experience, actually slightly less, a man, was being paid a lot more than I was. Now that's because when I went in and was offered the job, and we're talking, I'm not talking big money here, I'm talking about BBC, you know, scale 6 or whatever level we were on, really not high money for Radio 4 announcers and newsreaders. So a small difference makes a big difference. But if you go in on a low salary and every year they raise that salary by 1.5% or whatever, the difference becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. If you never go in on the starting salary the same as someone else, you just fall further and further behind. When I went in, you know, 20 years ago now, more than that, my starting salary was behind a lot of men, and that gap just got bigger and bigger. And that's the same situation now. If when you start a job, you don't battle for the absolute best you can get, you will live with that discrepancy for the rest of your life. And
there's no transparency. And I think the power of change is in clarity and transparency. And the one
is there somebody to advise these girls or these newcomers to the BBC?
It shouldn't be to them. The responsibility shouldn't be theirs. The responsibility should be the employers. And the one time you were all transparent and actual equal was when you worked for Kate O'Mara.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did a theatre tour for Kate O'Mara when I was very, very young. Everybody over the age of 30 was paid £300 a week, and everyone under the age of 30 was paid £200 a week. And no one had any complaints about that. It was just as soon, she was on the same. It was just she used her dynasty money to pay for it.
We just had to sort of suck it up. We just had to not say anything about it. And I had
You
that.
had the same problem, did you?
Yeah, I did this series called Dynasty, and when I went into it, I was paid okay, not anything spectacular, but as the series went on, I became, and I'm saying this objectively, I'm not blowing my trumpet because I know that it was true, I became more and more popular. And I asked for more money to have parity with John Forsyth, who was the leading man, and absolutely, totally refused. Oh no, he's the man, he gets more money, and a lot more money, almost twice as much as what I was getting. And so finally, towards, after 2 or 3 years, I was advised by some close advisors to not go back to the series, to just say, bye-bye, I'm not coming back unless you give me more money. I was called every name under the sun: ambitious, bitch, aggressive. You can't be a strong woman without being insulted like crazy, particularly in the 80s. I mean, they threw the book at me. Thank God there wasn't social media then. I don't know what I would have done. Anyway, to cut a long story short, they finally and very reluctantly brought me back to the series after me being out of it for one, and they gave me more money. And but still not the same as John Forsyth, who also had, in any kind of advertising or any kind of DVDs that went out, anything, that his face should always be front and center and bigger than any of the women or any of the other people. On the final series, I finally got a very large amount of money, which is what I was getting parity with the people on Friends, the people on Dallas. When I went to report for the first day, I was told, oh, Joan, I'm sorry, you're getting so much money now that we can't afford to have you in every series. So out of the 20 series, you're only going to be in 10. So in other words, my salary was then actually cut in half. And well, to be again objective, the series went down the tube because Linda Evans had too. And
I watched that series. I watched that series. It was thrilling.
I know it was serious.
Absolutely thrilling.
Like
yeah, and I loved it. But I think, do you I don't know if you agree with me, ladies, but is it a problem with women's self-worth? Is it a problem of a woman being sure of themselves so that they know that they're as good as their colleagues, and when they go to apply, they should know and ask around what is the salary? I find we women tend to lay the blame on other people. I find that we should start thinking what's wrong with us and how can we make it better for ourselves. Do you find?
No, I think I don't think the women have to be equal. I think they have to be better. If you're in high-powered jobs, you have to do it better because you are criticized so much. You're criticized if your skirt's too short, if your heels are too high, you're wearing too much lipstick. I'm not talking now about showbiz. I'm talking about in normal life, in shops, in businesses. And I think that a woman is judged mercilessly when she comes on the scene, often by other women, sadly. The sisterhood does not always exist. We'd like it to exist. And I found that it doesn't always exist. I have some great women friends, and I've had some women friends who have not been so great.
Yeah, but this is interesting because I feel, I don't know if Alice and Claire agree, that women have moved on a bit. At the beginning of my career, I used to feel there's a lot of jealousy from other women, etc. But I feel that women have started to realize that they do need to support each other more and come together. And I saw this at the BBC, for example, when they were asking for equal pay, that picture of all the BBC presenters and anchors there. And journalists. Is that true now?
I think one of the things that used to create friction was that very often there'd only be one woman picked for a certain job, or there'd only be one type of role for a woman or for an actress, and therefore you're fighting another woman for that one chance. I know certainly in sports broadcasting there used to be the feeling that, oh well, we've got one woman, we can't have two. As soon as it became just much more open, and actually the opportunities were more levelly spread for those that had expertise in the area, the competition with another woman became less fraught, and you could be very supportive. And I've actually really enjoyed helping other women, you know, who are starting out in the game. I really like quite often offering advice that Alice says they haven't asked for, but I'll offer it anyway. So I tend to be very supportive.
Women so often have got to juggle two jobs, because if a woman, for example, gets married and has a child and also has a job, it's very, very hard to know which direction she has to make her priority. Because if you make it your children, your work's going to suffer, and if you make it your work, then your children are going to suffer. I had problems with my children because I had to work. I was the breadwinner in my family, and I had 2 children, and I eventually had 3 children, but I had to go out to work early in the morning, because, you know, as an actress, you do have to be there at 6 or 7. And while they're talking about, you know, what the children have to eat, and you had to have helpers or nannies, because you can't leave the children there by themselves when they're 9 and 10 or 11. Somebody has to walk them to school. And I was very torn between this whole thing, which is why when I first had my children, when I was 27 or 28, I gave up. I gave up my career. I decided I couldn't do both. I couldn't have, you know, a family. I couldn't be a good mother and also be an actress, because it just didn't work. And I know so many times it's been very tough for children of actors and actors. I know it's been tough for my children too.
Any regrets there, John? Any regrets?
Regrets? No, like
the way you handled your time.
Yeah. No, my regrets are not. I really don't have regrets, Baria. I think that perhaps my regrets are that I shouldn't have felt so guilty about it. I mean, I remember getting in the lift one day to go and do a film, and the nanny was there. And of course, I can hear people say, oh, she had a nanny. Yes, well, yes, I had to have a nanny because I couldn't leave my children alone. And we were talking about, does Sasha have to go to, you know, a football practice? Does Tara have to go to dancing class? What time they're coming out of school? What do you want them to eat? And I was doing that. I didn't have a husband. I was a single mother. And it was extremely hard, and I would suffer in the car. I was thinking, I've got to learn these 10 pages of dialogue. Oh, I did know them. And then I had to think, well, am I doing the right, did I get the right foods for tonight? Have I got the schedules for the children mixed up? It's very hard. And that's just as an actress. And I'm sure that many women today, well, millions of women are now having to work. They did not have to work before the war. Very few women did work.
Yeah.
They were stay-at-home moms, which was something they were proud of, like my mom. She was a stay-at-home mom. And now, because they have to work because of the finances.
But stay-home moms are working women as well, you know, in many ways, because, you know, they manage everything. One of the most thrilling things I've done is going to Bedouin areas in Saudi Arabia to interview the women. And it's incredible how strong these women are. They are the leaders in their community. They are actually in the fields, and they are bringing up the kids. They are cooking, they're ironing, and I found the men are having a very good life, more or less, almost just watching, you know. So, but the point is, what I find sometimes we have to do is apart from learning a lot about each other's lives and learning from them, is find ways and means to move forward and to give to the younger generation this advice. So ladies, what advice would you give young journalists and broadcasters going, or actresses in the case of Alice when you started. What would you tell them? How would you advise women going in those fields?
Well, I don't know, thinking about the conversation we've had and about trying to make sure we have equal pay and are treated equally, a huge part of that involves men. And I think it would be a mistake to see it as a war between women and men. I mean, women can get great support from each other, but we won't achieve this if men are not coming with us on this journey. And there's absolutely no reason why they shouldn't. I mean, a lot of them are still the people in power and still the people paying us. And if men believe in equality and the benefits that that gives, then they should be on board with this too. They should be looking. We shouldn't have to be fighting and going, am I getting the same as a man? I mean, a man doesn't go into an interview and go, oh, am I getting the same as a woman? They don't have to think that, and we shouldn't have to think that. And the people in charge of all of this should be making sure it happens. And I don't know if that would be my advice to someone, but I would say just we're all in this together. Society's in this together. It's not a binary war between two factions.
No war. I hope not. Absolutely no war. No. Claire, any idea? Sorry.
You wanted to know what advice I would give to young actresses starting today?
Yes. I mean,
I think, well, first of all, don't allow yourself to be abused. Don't allow yourself to somebody say, let me see your legs, or oh, you're very you're very pretty, let me come closer, let me feel your skin. None of that. I think that has gone already. I think it's very rare, but I also think that it is an extremely tough profession. The rejection that you have to face in acting, the rejection that you have to face by people. For every job that comes up, there's like 2,000 people that want that job. The success rate that you get is very limited. I consider that I'm very lucky to have to be a successful actress for many, many years. But and one of the things that I think that an actress should not think about, and an actor too, of course, is to try to become a star. All the good actors, they want to be actors. They want to act, and they want to improve their craft. They don't want to be, on the front pages of OK magazine. And I think that's a rather sad thing that unfortunately I've seen with a lot of young actors today, is that they want fame, or they want to be, one of those Kardashian type people. I think I'm digressing here. I think I'm going to pass it over to Claire.
Well, no, because I think the point you make is absolutely bang on. The thing is to have focus and passion and really work on your craft. And I think that is true across all the performance industries, that if you're good at what you do, and if you pick the things you really care about, and you pick those jobs because you want to learn yourself, and that's what motivates you to improve, and because you're curious, and because you actually want to have some sense of progress. And to be flexible, I think, is also pretty important in this life, and particularly this year, because it hasn't, obviously with acting, no stage work at all is possible. The students you work with, they haven't been able to do any of the things they would normally do. And for me, for sporting, obviously I would have been in Japan doing Olympics and Paralympics. I would have covered Wimbledon. I would have, the whole year would have been packed. You've then got to find other ways in which you can keep yourself mentally stimulated. And I write as well, so luckily I've sort of moved into much more writing, whereas that was always something I tried to cram in on the days off, and that's worked for me, but not everyone. I think that the thing is to try and use those ways of keeping taking in information, keeping learning, all of those things. But Joan's right, focus is all important. Keep concentrated on what you do because you love it.
But Joan, what is wrong with Hollywood? Why is it that the culture, and I'm sorry, I have to be careful here as well, but why is it that that still until today, I mean, we also the Me Too movement and what happened with those horrible men. Why does it still go on? Again, I go back to the confidence of women and themselves and their abilities.
I think there's been a huge change ever since the Harvey Weinstein and the various other men have been outed for what they did. I think that men are terrified now of treating women like that.
Yeah, the small window I have on Hollywood, I never used to think it's such hard work to be an actress, and how the end result, how does it start and how does it end? And I really think it's unbelievable that we think of it as a lighter kind of a career for a woman. And if you are pretty, then it's all that it takes. I think it's wonderful for a woman to be who she is, pretty, feminine, or whatever she is. But on the other hand, I find maybe people like you should explain how difficult it is, the actual product, how to produce a movie, or how to edit a movie, or how to direct a movie, and how to be an actress, isn't it?
Yes, well, it is very hard. I mean, a couple of years ago, I tried to get a movie going with Joan Collins and myself, about 2 women on a road trip, and it was so hard to raise the money, and it took years and years to raise the money for that film. Probably, actually, we were lucky, it was only 3 years. And people raise money and they go to all kinds of attempts. They mortgage their houses, they sell, their cars to raise the money to put into a movie or a stage show or a theater performance. And it gets savaged by the critics and it's gone. People who are in show business, most people are very dedicated. They really, I mean, right now, I have so many friends in the business who haven't worked. So many friends who, don't have any money. I mean, who are having a lot of problems. And who knows if our business is ever going to get off again. I drove down Shaftesbury Avenue the other day and it was empty. It was so sad because they're in the theater. But what I'm saying,
it will come back. I'm sure it will come back. We all love
come back. But what about the actors that have not been able to work? What about the young actors that are coming out of drama schools? What are they going to do? They don't have. One of my grandchildren is in drama school. She doesn't have a job prospect because there's nothing going on. So that's just one of the casualties of COVID. Let's hope that it will get better. But it is very difficult for people who are behind the scenes in Hollywood or the London theatre or the British films. It's very hard to get anything going.
Sure. I want to ask Alice and Claire. Let me start with Alice. Alice, who's your ideal? Do you have like somebody you think of as a...
Well, in the acting world, I suppose it would have been Judi Dench as a stage actress, and I won't be the only person to say that. But I never worked with her. I don't think I even did in radio drama, where I had the opportunity to work with massive stars because they were all prepared to come in and do a couple of days of radio because they didn't have to learn the lines, they didn't have to get dressed up, and that gave us, people like me, the opportunity to work with these incredible people. And I always really admired the people who could do it and still be lovely. There was a sort of thing, especially maybe 30 years ago or so, that you weren't really any good unless you kicked up a big fuss and demanded all sorts of things. And actually, I just always loved the people who were brilliant at what they did and managed to be kind, because lots of people can do that. You don't have to be horrible to get to the top. You can do it and still be kind to everybody around you. And that's probably what I admire most in anybody, really.
And Claire, do you have somebody who inspires you? A man, a woman, anybody?
Yeah, well, no, as I mentioned earlier in broadcasting, it was quite difficult to find women doing what I wanted to do. But I do remember being in America in the 90s when Ellen DeGeneres came out, and she was on the front of Time magazine. And I remember putting it in front of my mother actually and saying, "Look, this woman's amazing." And my mother looking at me going, "You trying to say something?" Which, yeah, I was. But I admired her and Oprah, and in ways in America, I think there were more female chat show hosts. There were more women who were making their own name, who had shows named after them, and that's not something I ever desired, but I think it is quite an important statement, and it's very rarely happened here. Very, very few women have had shows named after themselves, have they?
So do you think American women are much more forthcoming than British women then?
No, I think the American media has been, or the American entertainment industry, it may not have been kinder to women, and the film Bombshell is obviously based on truth, and clearly it has not been kinder to women in various networks. But I think they were a little earlier in adopting the idea that women could have their own shows named after them. I know who obviously cooks do. Nigella does.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Mary Berry does, and various. Yeah, we've done it with chefs in this country, cooks, and but not necessarily in sort of general entertainment. Can I just say to Joan, she was so lovely to us. Just after we'd done our civil partnership, but Equal Marriage had come in, and we sat with Joan at the Glamour Awards, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
I sat next to you, I think, Joan, and we were talking about we were going to have a wedding because then we could, or we were sort of just rubber stamping the fact that we already had done civil partnership. And you were so sweet and so supportive, and I do always appreciate, I really think it's important, and we touched on it earlier about women being supportive to other women. It really matters when someone is, and particularly when it's someone you admire hugely, who is more experienced, and you remember it. So I'd like to say thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Claire.
We have very few minutes. I want to go back to Dame Joan Collins, and I'm really enjoying this as a journalist, and I don't want it to end. Joan, you have immense experience in life and in your career. Can you tell me 3 things that you think can change women's lives? Just 3 things.
Well, I think you have to be resilient. I think you have to be able to move with the times. And I think you don't have to put up with any crap from anybody, whether it's your husband, your partner, your children, your boss. I don't mean by being, but I think that you have to be assertive without being aggressive.
What's the proudest thing you have in your life, Joan? What
The proudest thing is my children and my husband. I'm very, very lucky because I had some rather unfortunate marriages, and I now have the best marriage and the best man that anybody could have, and I'm very lucky.
So last thing, tell us how can marriage work? I'd like you all to answer that quickly.
You have to be friends. Be friends first.
And ladies, well, how does it work for you with your partner?
I always admire people who manage to keep a straight marriage working, because I think obviously it looks quite difficult to live with men. So living with a woman is quite it's a much easier.
Oh wow, interesting. Well, I think we've just come to the end of this amazing session. I really want to thank you all. It's been such a pleasure, and I learned a lot from you ladies, and I hope we can do this again soon. Yes, Tara?
Yes, definitely. Baria, you've done an amazing job. Thank you so much. And it's been so gorgeous to hear your answers, Claire and Alice, and Dame Joan, my mum. Wonderful to hear all of you today. Thank you so much for being a part of Created Forum. And we've got coming up a little video about the Seroptimists, who I've worked with for the last 5 years. They're an international organization of women supporting women's projects. And as I said, I've worked with them over the years to put together some of these fabulous events that we've done. And so we're going to have a little video from the Seroptimists, and then we're going to come back for panel 3, which is going to be intersectional champions and influencers. We've got Juno Dawson, a British writer and activist, Shamim Sarif, a British novelist and filmmaker, and we've got Hanan Katan, a Jordanian-born British-based film producer of Palestinian origin, and that will be moderated by Jane Hill, who's a journalist and TV news presenter. I hope you'll all stay with us and stay as part of this conversation. It's been so lovely to have you. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Baria.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Seroptimists International stands with girls around the world on October 11th, International Day of the Girl Child. to amplify their global voices under the 2020 theme, My Voice, Our Equal Future. Optimists encourage advocacy and global campaigns such as the Road to Equality to raise awareness, educate, and inform girls of the world to speak up and claim their basic human rights. Let's take a look at a few key projects from our 5 Soroptimist federations. Soroptimist International of Great Britain and Ireland, in partnership with Cora Cori, fight against the trafficking of girls through a 3-year project, rescuing girls who have been trafficked, often to neighboring India. The rescued girls are returned to their families, or if this isn't possible, provided with a home and education to rebuild their lives. We have been campaigning against human trafficking by fundraising for Stop the Traffic, holding workshops, and a club in India has even coached a police unit on their own mental health whilst they deal with this difficult subject. Every year, 12 million girls are married as child brides, half of them in Asia and the Pacific. Deep poverty forces parents to sell their daughters into marriage and labor exploitation, and Soroptimists all across Asia and the Pacific implement high-impact projects to prevent child marriage and the modern-day slavery of girls. Many projects have been running for 5 to 10 years, benefiting thousands of girls. These projects are replicable and scalable anywhere in the world, with proven methodologies to prevent child marriages and child labor. We engage and influence governments, community leaders, and parents. Every year, we enable thousands of girls to complete their education and fund their skills training. We are committed to the protection and empowerment of the girl child. Never does a girl child deserve to be abused or subjected to violence. Soroptimists across Europe advocate at all levels for gender equality and the elimination of all forms of violence, raising awareness for state responses, launching campaigns to educate and persuade for better policies, social and justice services. Our projects aim to support victims and improve their lives with immediate assistance, shelters, and education. During the COVID-19 lockdown, we shared helpline numbers and urged governments to ensure the implementation of the Istanbul Convention. Female genital mutilation, FGM, is a global issue, and there are estimated to be more than 3 million girls around the world at risk annually. In Western, Eastern, and Northeastern regions of Africa where the practice is common, Soroptimist International, through its Road to Equality global appeal, is targeting the issue at grassroots community level. In partnership with the global media campaign to end FGM, Soroptimist International is funding and supporting 6 young and inspired FGM activists as they raise their voices and work to change mindsets to end this violation of human rights. SIA has a unique education program that helps secondary school girls who face obstacles to their future success by providing them with the guidance and resources they need to achieve their goals. In its first 5 years, Dream It, Be It has reached more than 70,000 girls in 14 countries and territories. Participation in the program provides girls with more confidence, new tools to overcome obstacles, and skills to set achievable goals for their future. Girls have made steady progress since 1995. Literacy rates for females aged 15 to 24 have increased from 80 to 90%, and nearly 2 out of 3 girls attend secondary school. Harmful practices such as child marriage and FGM have declined in the past 25 years, but they continue to disrupt and damage the lives of girls globally. As Soroptimist International looks to the next 100 years, we will work for a world where girls are educated, empowered, and enabled to reach their full potential.